in the lead up to the state election. And I'm wondering this morning if you have been a victim of this, if you've experienced problems with youth crime in your suburb on the Gold Coast. Does it seem to be getting worse, or do you think it's just portrayed that way because we see pictures and videos on social media, so maybe does it seem worse than it actually is? The LNP has announced its adult time, adult crime policy ahead of the state election, but legal experts and community groups have criticised it, saying it won't actually act as a deterrent. The northern Gold Coast, as we know, has experienced a population boom. It's been one of the fastest growing regions for years. So how significant is the issue of youth crime there? I caught up with local MP Michael Crandon.
Well, the same as the rest of Queensland, unfortunately, and that is that it is rampant. We constantly see shots on Facebook of attempted burglaries, etc., and it's enough is enough, to be honest. And of course, where we are is the top of the M1 Gold Coast corridor, and that's where most of the action happens when there's car chases and so forth as well, which can create all sorts of havoc.
Is it just a case, though, that we're seeing more of it because of social media, but the actual figures, the actual crime figures aren't as high as they're being portrayed? Have the rates of crime actually increased?
They have, and in fact they're up 13% year on year. 22-23 figures compared to the previous year are up 13%. That's the Australian Bureau of Statistics data. 290,000 almost, just under 290,000 criminal offences in Queensland, the highest in the country, the highest by far. And I mean, one statistic that jumped out to me was the number of cars being stolen. It was something like, it's just an amazing figure of 18,000 or something cars. It's just mind-blowing, the numbers of the figures that are going on, and they are increasing in Queensland.
So adult crime, adult time, the LNP saying that this will act as a deterrent to try and bring those figures down. But the experts have said that there's not really evidence to support that. Is it just a slogan in the lead up to the election?
I think it's more than a slogan. It's what's being captured by the media, and clearly it was at the beginning of the statement being made by David Crisafulli that adult crime, adult time, but there's a lot behind that. It's not just about that. For example, the $175 million Staying on Track program, where every plan will be tailored for young people. We're talking about 12 months after being released from detention. Every plan tailored for each individual young person, looking at putting them through schooling, TAFE, driving lessons, professional mentoring, sport, extracurricular. I mean, you've probably heard of ESWAV here on the northern Gold Coast. Yes. They're doing a program at the moment that runs for 10 weeks with youth, and these are the pointy end, if you like, of the youth in that sphere. They are the offenders. They are being referred to them by youth justice, and they are getting a great deal of success. But part of that success is that they keep these guys become part of the ESWAV family, and so they can keep on coming back, and that, to my mind, is what we have to do. We have to give them intensive support after they come out. But look, can I just make the point? Adult crime, adult time. We're talking about the serious end of the spectrum here. We're talking about some life-taking actions by these young people, and at the end of the day, some of them are being slapped on the wrist. I mean, I've heard of 2-year sentences for manslaughter following multiple car thefts, killing, and 2-year sentences for that sort of thing, whereas it is wanton crime being committed. So we're talking about the worst of the worst are going to be wearing this type of sentence. And of course, we've got to work right across the spectrum, and that's the other part of David Crisafulli and the LNP's program. It's not just about these guys. We have to stem that flood, but we also have to work intensively right through the spectrum. It's a whole of government issue.
And the issue or the question is, do young people have ultimately the same capacity as adults to recognise the effects of their actions and the same capacity to control their actions when you're talking about the same sentence for the same crime, but they don't have the same capacity? Or do you believe they do, that children have the same capacity as adults to recognise the effects of their actions?
When we're talking about the very young, in the 10, 12, 13 age group, perhaps not. But as they're getting past those ages, the reality is that they know what they're doing. They know it's a crime. They know what the outcomes can potentially be, including loss of life, including their own life. So, yes, they do. I've got two grandsons in their mid-teens. I can't imagine them doing what some of these guys are doing, but they are smart kids. They know what is right from wrong. And these young fellas that are doing what they're doing, mainly young guys, and obviously there are some girls involved as well, but mainly young guys, are very much in the thick of something that they know is a crime. They're getting some sort of a thrill out of it. But the stats also don't lie in that the amount of this type of crime drops away dramatically when they turn 18 years of age. Now, what's the difference between a 17-year-old and an 18-year-old? One of them is being treated as a child. The other one is being treated as an adult. And there's a 71% decrease in this type of crime once they turn 18 years of age.
Would that not maybe speak to they've had another year to mature?
1 year? Really? I think it's more about what they know is the consequence, that they are going to be dealt with in the adult criminal justice system and not get a slap on the wrist. Look, anecdotal evidence is all over the place. Recently I was talking to a police officer that told me that he was asked to go to a youth justice conference where the youth was intended to face the person that he had committed a crime against, which was a car theft, and the impact that it had had on the family. When he looked at the Q Prime, he said to me that the kid had had more than 50 car thefts under his belt. He'd already stolen more than 50 cars, and now they're talking about youth, some sort of try and rehabilitate him by listening to what one of his victims had suffered. It's just crazy. We're talking the pointy end of the spectrum. We're talking that top few hundred. And by the way, there's probably less than 30 of them on the Gold Coast in total. These youth that are taking up most of the crime. There's less than 500 in Queensland. But in days gone by, just a few years ago, it was less than 300. The number is increasing. These guys are giving each other an egg on, if you like, to do more and more and more crime. No, it's time. Adult crime, adult time for that pointy end of the spectrum.
What about the focus on trying to actually prevent the crime from happening in the first place? Wouldn't a significant boost to the education system, for instance, or other types of community groups be more beneficial, and in terms of providing the support that many of these young people don't have and absolutely need?
I absolutely agree with you. And as I said to you earlier, this is a whole of government problem. We have to use all of the assets of government right across the spectrum. But you're absolutely right. This starts, I refer to them as the gummies and the alkali biters. We have to start work on programs for families when their children are in that age group, when they're being impacted by what's going on at home and so forth. We have to be working with families and those young people. We have to be working with them in primary school. We have to have programs in place in the primary school system, in the high school system. When they move into high school, we have to make sure they're properly transitioning into high school. It's not every kid, we know that, but there's an element of our young people that are being missed and they have to be worked with right the way through their schooling years and into their teenage years. As I said, right across the spectrum, we have to have the health professionals involved, mental health, etc., at young ages. We have to have the education system involved, but we have to give them the resources as well. And of course, at the other end of the spectrum, we have to make sure that we've got more police on the beat. I'm 25% down on the number of police I had two years ago here on the Northern Gold Coast at Coomera and Pimpama police stations. I'm 25% down at a time when the growth in my electorate over those few years has been going up by 6% per annum, 3 times the state and Gold Coast average. And I've got less coppers.
Let's talk about that population boom in the Northern Gold Coast. How many extra voters will you have in your electorate this year's election?
Well, right now it's 53,400 voters versus the average of 39,500. So I'm up 35% on that figure, the highest in the state by far. I'm anticipating that once when people realise there's an election coming and they sign they change their addresses, etc.
Yes.
I'm anticipating it to be about 55,000 versus 39,500, say 40,000 across the state. So around 15,000 more voters. But of course, they bring their kids with them. I've got 20,000 kids going to school in the Coomera electorate right now. That's as at the audited figures from August last year. 20,000 kids going to school, and that is 6,000 higher than any other electorate in the state. There is no other electorate that goes anywhere near us. We've got more than 100,000 people. The average is, as residents, the average is something in the order of 60,000. And so the numbers go on. We are the fastest growing region in Queensland, and yet we're not getting the resources that we need. 25% down on police numbers, that's just absolutely ludicrous. The infrastructure, what's happening at exit 38, don't start me on exit 45 minutes to get across the M1 just to get on the M1, things of that nature. But yeah, look, we've got to turn our attention to getting those resources in place. I absolutely agree with you.
A lot of growing pains at the northern end of the Gold Coast. Michael Crandon, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you, Sarah. Bye-bye.
Coomera MP Michael Crandon joining you this morning on ABC Gold Coast. Sarah Cumming with you. What